Welcome to Go a Little Mad, a horror movie podcast. My name is Jason, and I love scary movies.
I'm Briana, and I don't. Today we'll be discussing Final Destination.
Woo! It's a classic of my childhood. I've seen it recently anyway, but I was very excited to watch it again.
I wasn't. What a surprise. Before we get into the movie, first, let's talk about the results from last week's polls that we put up. It was a pumpkin. Okay, Sam's a pumpkin, guys.
Yeah, actually, after we recorded, I looked it up, and both the actor who played him and the creator said he was a pumpkin, but Briana went ahead and posted that poll on Instagram anyway for some reason.
Yeah, so he's a pumpkin.
Told you so.
And I concede, even though I still think he doesn't look like a pumpkin.
He looked exactly like a pumpkin.
The result of the second poll was which should be our last movie of the year. And I forget what the other choice was, but what one was Sinister.
The other one was It Follows.
Oh, yeah.
Both are favorites of mine. You know, I feel like we've kind of eased Briana into this. And now, like, if I'm a listener of this podcast, I want us to get to stuff that's really going to upset her. So, I'm really excited to be watching Sinister.
I'm not, but I'm sure it'll be fine, right?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so back to Final Destination. It was directed by James Wong, and it was written by Glenn Morgan, James Wong, and Jeffrey Reddick. It stars an all-star early 2000s cast.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you watched Dawson's Creek, you knew at least two of these people.
We have Devon Sawa as Alex Browning. We have Ali Larder as Clear, not Claire, Clear, which I discovered halfway through the movie, Rivers.
I actually have in my notes, Briana probably thinks her name is Claire. And then about halfway through the movie, she asked me, wait, is her name Clear, not Claire? Did not see that coming.
We have Kerr Smith as Carter Horton, Kristen Cloak as Valerie Luton, and Sean William Scott as Billy Hitchcock.
I think that's Lawton. I think it's Miss Lawton.
I don't know, it's spelled Luton, like L-E-W.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
I'll take your word for it.
I also have a little fun fact on the names. Do you have that for your flesh wounds?
No, I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
But I go right ahead.
Okay. So first, I'm proud of myself because Sean William Scott's character is named Billy Hitchcock. And I was just like, oh, like Alfred Hitchcock, I wonder if that was on purpose. And yes, it was. So several of the cast members' names are purposely in homage to old Hollywood stars and directors and things like that, specifically horror related. Alex Browning is for Todd Browning, and it is spelled T-O-D, the Todd Browning person. He directed 1932's Freaks. But also there's a character called Todd Wagner, who is also spelled with T-O-D. And he is supposed to be named for George Wagner, which is the director of The Wolfman.
And Todd Browning, obviously.
I guess, yeah, but what I read didn't say that. So I was like, okay, it has to be.
It's not a coincidence that they spelled Todd with one D. Who
well,
does that?
It's actually not, and there is another meaning to it, which we'll talk about as well.
Oh, foreshadowing.
Billy Hitchcock, obviously, for Alfred Hitchcock. Terry Chaney for Lou Chaney.
That's Lon Chaney, isn't it? Lon Chaney played the Wolfman?
The original Phantom of the Opera.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, he also played the Phantom of the Opera. That's still Lon Chaney.
Okay. Yep, reading it, it's an N, not a U, guys. Valerie Luton for Val Luton, who was in a bunch of old horror movies. And there's also an FBI agent, Agent Schreck, named for Max Schreck, who is another famous old Hollywood horror star.
See, I thought he was named for the ogre, obviously.
Well, of course, that as well.
It was kind of weird. He spent like half the movie telling Devon Sawa to get out of his swamp.
Right. Although I think Shrek came out after this, I feel like.
He did.
A synopsis for the movie. A regular teenager has a premonition giving him a peek into death's design. Is it a blessing or a curse? We follow Alex and his friends as they are followed by death itself.
Ooh, spooky. And do you know who Death is, Briana? Mr. Tony Todd, the mortician.
No, that was debunked. I read.
It was not debunked. He's in future sequels.
At some point, someone in the film someone involved with the film has said that it's not supposed to be a physical representation of death.
That's so crazy to me because, like, if you watch Final Destination 2, his, like, role in Final Destination 2 is very cryptic and very, like, he is death. And I don't know who it was that made that quote.
Maybe they said it, and then later they were like, actually, though, let's go with this fan theory.
Yeah, Tony Todd, for those of you who don't know, is kind of a mainstay in the horror genre. He is Candyman himself, and I am a big fan. He's one of those guys that if you see him, you're like, oh, him, but you probably don't know Tony Todd off the top of your head.
All right, what are your flesh wounds?
First, we've got our Rotten Tomato score, 35%. Now, I think I just want to...
That's bad.
It is bad. Yeah, I know. And so here's the thing, though. I also want to stop and talk about the Rotten Tomatoes scores for a second because, you know, similar to my horror buff grades, I feel like people look at Rotten Tomatoes scores as like a grading scale. You know, anything above a 70 is passing, anything below is failing, et cetera, et cetera. That's actually not how Rotten Tomatoes works. What Rotten Tomatoes does is it aggregates the reviews simply into positive or negative. So 35% just means that 35% of the reviews were positive from critics. And that's important to remember in a movie like this because this movie has kind of a following from people that saw it in their teen years. It's a movie that has a lot of fond memories for a lot of people, maybe number 2 more so than number 1. But I just think it's important to keep these numbers in context because the fact that 35% of critics liked it doesn't always necessarily translate to the audiences. And I think this is definitely one of those movies where, you know, nobody's going to argue that this is a masterpiece or anything, but it's just a fun, popcorn, scary movie to watch on like a Saturday afternoon. Yeah, I'm a big fan. So 35 sounds low to me, but when you put it in context, I guess it kind of makes sense. You know, this isn't a movie where they sat down and connected all the dots and made sure there were no plot holes or anything like that. This is just a movie where you go, you turn off your brain and you have fun. And in that, I think it succeeds very well. So my 2 flesh wounds. The first is that this was actually written in, I don't have the year written down here. I had a mishap with my notes this week. But I believe in 1994 as a spec script for the X-Files. Now, what a spec script is, for anybody that doesn't know, is if you're a screenwriter, you're trying to break into the business, you write, it's called a speculative script. And that's a script based on something else that already exists that you would use to pitch to people for your writing skills. A spec script is going to have, it's written very differently than a regular script. So it's going to have a lot of details on the characters, on the scenes, things like that. Whereas a regular script has a lot of details on like camera direction and things like that. So this started as a spec script for the X-Files and eventually got turned into the movie that we know and love today.
Were they writers on the X-Files?
No.
They just were writing an episode for the X-Files.
Yep, that's what a spec script is. So like if you want to be a writer in Hollywood, you can just go ahead and write a spec Fast and Furious 10. And you can, you can give that to the studio and they'll probably throw it away. But, that's what you do. You use an existing IP and you write a script to show people that you know what you're doing.
I would like to confess I wrote a spec script, not fully, just a little bit for The Office. I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time, but, yeah, it was Michael testing out a British accent. And the whole point was he was going to talk with a British accent through the entire episode.
See, I think, though, you're confusing spec scripts with fan fiction.
No, because I really thought this was a good idea for an episode. Can you not see Michael Scott doing that?
Sure, but I mean, it wasn't a script, it was a story.
I was writing it in the form of a script, okay? So it was a script.
Do you still have this? Can we read it?
No, it's long gone.
I would very much be interested in reading this. So when you wrote your Backstreet Boys fan fiction back in the day...
How dare you?
Was that like a script or were those more fan fiction?
No, that was definitely fan fiction.
Okay.
Therefore, I understand the difference between a spec script and fan fiction.
All right. Fun. Okay, and for flesh wound number 2, it's actually pretty fun. When they were first producing the movie, New Line Cinema actually had stars in mind instead of Devon Sawa and Ali Larter.
Who?
They wanted Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst.
Absolutely not.
I think it would have been
Neither
fantastic.
of them are heartthrobs.
Are you kidding? I had the biggest crush on Kirsten Dunst growing up.
I think we already, unfortunately, and by we, I mean me, already talked down about Tobey Maguire in a previous episode. We definitely have.
I'm a big fan of Tobey Maguire, too.
Find him not attractive, not even in the least bit.
Well, maybe you should look beyond his body. He's not just a sexy child there for you to sexualize.
But these movies are all about that. It's teen movies.
Honestly, though, I feel like this movie's pretty light on sex.
Yes, but it has to have the hotties.
And I'm sorry, Devon Sawa is more of a hottie than Tobey Maguire?
I have it in my notes that I don't understand how Devon Sawa became a heartthrob because I don't think he's that attractive, but he's more attractive than Tobey Maguire.
He had that whole like slacker vibe that I feel like was very attractive in the early 2000s.
I mean, he looked just enough like Nick Carter. So,
I mean, of course you would say
which
that.
is the heartthrob of all heartthrobs.
Anyway, so there's no real reason known why they didn't go through this movie, but a lot of speculation is that they actually passed on it to do Spider-Man, which I think, worked out pretty well for their careers.
Yeah, I think they're okay.
But yeah, so those are my 2 little fun facts this week.
All right, so touch points for this. I really don't have any specific memories for this, so I'll let you kind of say whatever yours is. I mean, I just remember it as being one of those early 2000 films that I was not going to see because it was scary.
I definitely saw this in the theater, which I had to be. I mean, I couldn't have been older than 14. I was somewhere between 12 and 14 when this movie came out in the theater.
You were probably 12, actually.
Yeah, if it was
because
the first
I
half
was 13.
If it was the first half of 2000, I was 12. If it was the second half, I was 13. But anyway, I saw this movie in the theater as a child, along with a lot of other movies. I have a very specific memory of seeing Scream 2 in the theater, and I was 11, which is like, who let that happen? But anyway, I digress. So I saw this in the theater, and I've seen it many, many, many times since. Like I said, it's just kind of a fun, like, mindless movie to put on. It's, it's almost like the precursor to Saw in that they're just, like, dreaming up these inventive ways to kill people. And I say that being no big fan of Saw, but at least appreciating the work that goes into, those ideas.
Thinking of ways to kill people.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, this is, like, I feel like Final Destination is very much like an episode of House, where it's just like somebody sees a leaf on the ground and then it's like leaf, leave, gone, trip. Oh my God, he's got malaria. He went to Africa last year. You know what I mean? Like, it's very convoluted from how you get to point A to point B, but it's really fun to get there. And that's how a lot of these like death traps work in this movie.
Yeah.
So it's just something that I love. I'm a big fan. I just recently rewatched all 5. I had never seen 4 and 5 before. And, I'm not going to, again, they're not masterpieces, but it was a fun afternoon. 2 holds a special place in my heart. And I think a lot of people, I feel like the logging truck for 2 is kind of iconic for our generation.
I didn't even see that movie, but I absolutely know that. And do I stay behind a logging truck? Absolutely not.
No, I was on the highway just 2 days ago and there was a logging truck 2 cars up and I moved to a different lane. I'm not
Lessons learned.
Tempting fate.
All right. Speaking of tempting fate, shall we get into it?
Let's do it.
So the opening shows New Line Cinema, right? And right off the bat, I am nervous because I feel like they've done a lot of scary movies.
Oh yeah, New Line is like
I Googled it.
Yeah,
they're
Scream,
the
Friday
Jasons,
the 13th.
They're the Freddys, they're Texas Chainsaw, Annabelle, It, The Conjuring. And the most frightening of all, The Little Vampire featuring Jonathan Lipnicki.
Fantastic movie. We just talked about that movie the other day.
Yeah, we did. So I was just like, oh no, okay, I'm nervous. The opening credits is just a montage of ominous music and flashes of various things. There's a thunderstorm. There's these little figurines hanging in a window. There's a fan blowing. And there's a lot of focus on that fan throughout this movie. There's airline tickets. There's books about France. And when they pull it off the shelf, the camera lingers on the book behind it, which is called Death of a Salesman. There's biblical imagery. Just very long credits featuring an early 2000s star-studded cast. And very different from the other movies that we've watched so far in terms of how long the credits were. It was never ending.
Yeah, they were very long. They were like the complete credits right up top, and I'm fine with that. It was,
more typical, just from what we're used to, I feel like.
Yeah.
The official movie starts with mom and dad, and they're helping. I'm going to call him Casper, guys. You knew this, right? He's going to be called Casper for the entire the entire thing. So they're helping Casper pack. And in the corner there, I noticed it immediately, a Google Dolls poster. And, although I wonder, did anyone ever actually have posters of the Google Dolls in their bedroom?
I'm sorry, the what?
The Google Dolls.
You said Google Dolls that last time.
Goo Dolls.
Thank you.
Regardless of whether someone actually had one of those posters, I immediately feel at home. I am in the 90s. I mean, technically it's the early 2000s here, but feels so good.
Yeah, I mean, I watched Goo Goo Dolls perform at the Thanksgiving parade last year. Johnny Resnick's still looking good.
He sure does. Still has the same hair. Mom goes to rip the luggage tag off of his suitcase from like the last trip that he took. And he stops her and says, no, you have to keep it on. It's good luck because he survived his last trip. Not only is this the most obvious of foreshadowing, but I disagree. You have to take that tag off because you don't need to confuse the TSA people who are handling your luggage. They one quick glance and they send your luggage to Dallas when you're going to Vegas.
You're a real advocate for the TSA, huh?
No, I just don't want to lose my luggage.
I disagree with you heavily here. And actually, this is a scene that infuriates me.
Why?
Okay, because I hate flying. You know that about me. I actually have
Sure
it
do.
here that every time I see this movie, it adds about 30 days to the next time I can fly.
Well, I'm flying next week.
We're currently on pace for about 2029. So as somebody who's pretty nervous about flying, and I'm not superstitious. I'm a little stitious. But like, if I said to you, don't take this tag off because it's good luck, and you just knowing that I want this as a good luck talisman, rip it off callously, that is a bitch move.
Oh, I wouldn't do that. If you believed that, I'm not going to do it. But I'm taking mine off.
That's fine, but he believed it, and his mom said that's nonsense
Yeah.
and ripped it off, and look what happened. Look what happened. This movie doesn't even exist if his mom isn't such a bitch.
Wow, it's all his mom's fault. And then the dad says, live it up. You got your whole life ahead of you. And already I feel like at this point between the credits and the last two things that have been said, it can't even be called foreshadowing at this point.
No,
I mean, is.
I think that's like a rule any movie where someone says, oh, you're so young, you've got your whole life ahead of you. That person is going to die in the next act. Yeah,
You're
100%.
dead. Everyone's dying. Next, it's night and he's asleep, and wind blows even though his windows are closed. The door blows open, posters wave, book pages move. He wakes up as though he just woke up from a bad dream, and we hear like his name, Alex, faintly in the background, like they're calling for him.
And the wind here is an ongoing theme. I'm sure you noticed that. The wind shows up everywhere, and that is a theme throughout all 5 movies. Every single death, you're going to see some wind in a place where there should not be wind. And I don't love that.
Well,
it's weird to me, but
I have it somewhere else in my notes to talk about it, but it is, I mean, it's a good way to personify or represent something that otherwise can't be seen. Like they had to do something to show that something sinister exists here.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. They definitely did, but I don't know, it's just silly because like sometimes there's wind and there actually like just could be wind. So like if you're living in that universe, if you are Alex Browning, what does a windy day feel like for you? That's just got to be like the most stressful thing you've ever experienced, right?
So when he wakes up, he looks at the fan. So again, we're looking at that fan. I literally thought the fan was going to be what kills him in this movie because of how many times they look at the fan. And then he looks at the clock, which reads 1 o'clock. So it's 1 a.m. But then as he kind of turns over and goes back to sleep, the camera zooms in on the clock and it switches from 1 o'clock to 1:80. So I'm like, okay, that's his flight number. Spoiler alert, it is. Next, we're at the airport meeting all of the others going to Paris. So he's going to Paris on a school trip. He's part of like the French club or something.
And I love this airport scene because this airport still had a clapboard. And I love me a good clapboard.
What's a clapboard?
That's the arrivals and departures where like the numbers flip up and down. And now they're all
I didn't
digital.
even know it was called that.
Yeah, and now they're all digital screens and it's fine. Maybe it's not called a clapboard. I think it is. And digital's fine, but I miss that sound of just like, I have like a memory of being in like the train station in New Haven and just like hearing everything flip over. And it's a very satisfying, it's almost like ASMR. Like I love that sound. So maybe I'd be more willing to fly if we still had some clapboards.
I doubt it. You can probably find the sound effect somewhere. Before we kind of get to that part that you're talking about, I mean, first, just the fashions that we're seeing here. These 2 girls walk by dressed in baby blue, and I'll be mentioning them a couple more times. They're the baby blue girls. They have these matching hair clips in the front of their hair, like butterfly clips. You know exactly what I'm talking about if you're 35-ish years old. They have the whole frosted makeup look. Why did we ever think any of that looked good? What a time. Do I miss it? Yes. We meet Casper's best friend, Todd, with 1D. He looks 40. I actually considered calling him 40 throughout this entire thing because of how old he looks. I looked it up to see if he was like 30. He's not. He's 22, which is also the same age as Devon Sawa, but he looks so much older. Anyway, we're given like our first impressions of all the people kind of going on this trip. So we have Todd, who's like girl crazy. We have Carter, who's the alpha male jock, and he has a girlfriend, Terry, who I thought was named Tammy until I looked up the cast.
That's weird. You never get names wrong.
We have a brunette, Allie Larder, and she's the one who actually knows French.
I like her better as a brunette. I think she pulls it off.
No.
Okay.
And then we have Stifler. I can't call him anything else because he practically is Stifler in this movie. A little less disgusting, but he's a dumbass.
Yeah, he's a little more of a harmless clown than Stifler, I would say. They're both like ridiculous, but Hitchcock he's the class clown, and he's just like an idiot, and every time he speaks you laugh at him, and that's who he is. And Sean William Scott plays that to a T.
Very well. Yeah, he was typecasted immediately. In the airport, they're all gathered together. They're checking in. A man hands Casper a pamphlet, and says, "Death is not the end." So some like religious man. And the
They
teacher...
were Hare Krishnas.
What's that?
You've never seen Hare Krishnas? Like they're like bald. They're in the airport. They hand out pamphlets.
Never have I ever seen it. You know what? I bet they can't stand in the airport anymore.
Yeah, that's probably like a pre 9/11 thing.
Yeah.
They were infamous for like being at airports and handing out pamphlets and stuff. Again, I feel like this is a situation where if I pull up a picture of Hare Krishnas, you're going to go, oh yeah, okay.
That's our entire life.
Yeah.
And then the teacher, Mrs. Luton, she like gets him away. Now this is where Casper is checking in, and that's where you saw the clapboard that you love so much. And he's looking at that, I called it a flight list, and it's updating a lot. It's distracting him. And this is where he kind of was relaxed, and now he starts to seem not so relaxed. Unclear if the clapboard was actually changing as much as we saw it change.
That's what they look like when they change.
No, but was it really happening, or was he like seeing that?
Oh, I found no reason to think it wasn't happening.
Okay. But the woman checking him in says that his birthday is the same as the departure time. And then he turns around to look at the update screen again, and and the camera zones in on the word terminal. So everyone is gonna die if you don't know. Like, they're telling you what's happening.
I thought that was just like an homage to that Tom Hanks movie. Love that movie.
No, that's not a good one.
Disagree.
She puts the baggage tag on it, and it reads
Final Destination.
They said the thing. Next, we're at the gate waiting. Carter and Terry, his girlfriend, are they're like rounding second base in public here. They are just making out. And once again, you're reminded we are watching a teen movie. And they just don't make those anymore. It's sad. What do teens watch now? They don't have these classic films.
Well, I mean, that's because all of the teens that watch them grew up to be emotionally damaged millennials like us. So now every film has to be like an allegory for grief, or, it's got to have some deeper meaning. We can't just have fun movies anymore because we're all just so dead inside.
Casper is looking out the window at the airplane, and it's right there. The front of it is just in your face. It is so close to the building. It was kind of an unsettling shot. And very aggressive, just the way, and I think you're supposed to feel that way. That's why it's because they don't actually park that way, looking at the building like that. They're always at an angle. Todd, and here's where I'm going to say what his name means. So TOD means death in German. So that's why they spelled it that way.
Oh, it also means time of death.
Oh, snap.
Yeah,
a
just
double
thought of that
meaning.
off the top of my head.
Well, he tells Casper, let's go to the bathroom because we don't want to poop on the plane, basically, because the baby blue girls will just forever associate the smell with him, and that blows any chance of a hookup or whatever.
That is a fantastic point. I'm not trying to join the Mile High Club, but if I know I'm going to be in a cramped bathroom area like that, I'm absolutely going to the bathroom before I get on the plane.
It's not a bad idea. It's polite for everyone, honestly.
Yeah, especially like Paris. That's a long flight. You know, that's not like an hour and a half to DC.
While in the bathroom, John Denver is playing, and he realizes, that John Denver died in a plane crash. Now, I know that fact, but I want to know, does the average teenager actively know this song playing is John Denver? I would never. And also, he died in a plane crash.
I'm gonna say probably, for two reasons. One, the song was Rocky Mountain High, which is arguably his most famous song, one of his most famous songs.
I know the song, and I would never put it together that it's John Denver.
And two, he died in 96, 97. So this is something that's still fresh in our brains.
Oh, okay.
And the third part about it is, even if you don't get that reference, the lyrics to Rocky Mountain High that are playing says, "I've seen fire raining in the sky," or "I've seen raining fire in the sky," which is, foreshadowing. But this song is a theme throughout the movie. It plays 2 or 3 more times.
Yeah.
Each time somebody is about to just get murked.
And he starts kind of panicking even more. And at this time, I'm wondering, why is he panicking so much? Where is this coming from? And I think he's supposed to be getting across to viewers that he has a feeling that he can't explain or anything. It's just there.
And I'll be honest, this scene, like him falling into it at the airport and freaking out a little bit, like that's not even supernatural for me. Like I just relate to that, like on a normal level. So I can't imagine being in this scenario.
As they're walking on the jet bridge to board, he's distracted and he keeps having to get pushed along. And it's thundering out. He notices that the plane is scratched up by the door. He looks at the gap between the plane and the jet bridge, which I also always look at. And I think about what happens if I drop my phone, because I'm always carrying my phone so I can look at my seat number. Even though I might know my seat number, I still need to look at it constantly.
Right. It's like when you order food at a restaurant, you need to be looking at the menu, even though you've decided what you're going to get 20 minutes ago.
Exactly. And I just think, what happens if while I'm stepping onto this plane, I just drop that right in there? He boards, there's a screaming infant, and the kid behind him says that they're safe because it'd be a fucked up god to take down a plane, and like the younger the better. He says all this horrible crap. Casper gets seated and turns the air on full blast. He's obviously stressed.
I mean, he's just so sweaty. You gotta get that sweat off.
The baby blue girls ask Todd if he'll change seats with them so that they can stay together, I think. And he says he has a UTI. I don't get it.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting because he is so dead set on getting laid this trip.
Right.
So like his opening is, I have a UTI. That's a good way to get nobody to have sex with you ever.
They ask Casper and he says sure, and this leads to Todd to call him the F-A word.
Yeah, and then he also makes a comment about titty fucking the baby blue girl. So I mean, this is like a peak early 2000s like toxic masculinity moment where it's just like you cannot do that anymore.
No.
And even seeing it's a little awkward, but you kind of almost appreciate just how stupid we were.
Right.
Yeah.
Lessons learned, right? So his seat is all janky. Like the fold-up table falls open, and when he goes to close it, a piece just, that little clippy piece just breaks right off. The plane starts taking off, and it's stressful because we're kind of experiencing it from his like anxious perspective.
And just to interject here, like that plane takes off really fast, right? He is on the plane for like 4 seconds before that plane starts to take off.
Yeah, I mean, takeoff is horrendously long, and that would not be fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wouldn't want to watch them taxi on the runway for 45 minutes, but I immediately, like, even as somebody who doesn't fly, was like, that was way too fast. Like, at least give us like a cut to show that some time has passed or something.
Once they're off the ground, everyone starts doing the wave and they start clapping, and just absolutely not. No, we do not clap on take. I've never heard anyone clap on takeoff. I've heard people clap when we land, which is also stupid, but never on takeoff.
Yeah, that is peak white people.
Things white people do.
So this scene at takeoff actually reminded me of one time when I flew. It was the last time I flew. I was flying from Boston to Louisville, Kentucky, and I got in my seat, and there was a 12-year-old child sitting next to me, unaccompanied. And he was telling me how his parents are divorced. His dad's a pilot, so he flies all the time. And it's raining a little bit on takeoff, just like here. And as we start to take off, like you see the rain go sideways on the windows, my eyes are squeezed shut. I am white knuckling the armrest. And then like as soon as we like level out, I like open my eyes. I am in a cold sweat. I've definitely got a couple tears rolling down my face. I am miserable. And this kid is just sitting there, the happiest kid in the world. Like, that was awesome. And
have some of his perspective.
Yeah, I gotta work on that. But anyway, so the rain coming sideways and Alex's response, like that is, I cannot stress enough. This is like when we fly together, this is literally me in an airplane. So good luck.
Looking forward to it. Then rumbling starts and people start getting a little nervous, but the flight attendants are okay. So, everyone chills and, the rumbling eventually stops. But then, just as you relax again, it all starts again, but it's worse.
And let me ask you, do you know, why do the lights go off during turbulence?
Do you know the answer?
I don't know the answer.
No,
I was asking
don't
you.
know.
You've flown. I don't really fly.
I've never seen the lights go off during turbulence.
Oh, maybe that's just a movie thing then.
Like, you mean flashing?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've never had the lights flash on a plane.
I feel like that happens in movies and TV shows and stuff all the time.
I mean, knock on wood, like, actually, because I'm about to fly next week, I've never experienced even anything close to that kind of turbulence. I've only one time experienced turbulence that validated wearing a seatbelt. Once.
You should always wear a seatbelt.
I know, but sometimes I think, well, if this is going down, what is the seatbelt doing for me? But one time there was turbulence that was bumpy enough where I was like, oh, my body is moving and I cannot stop it. That is why we have the seatbelts. But luggage starts falling from overhead compartments. The oxygen masks eventually fall. Everyone's just screaming. It is chaos. There's an explosion and a few seats and people in the seats fall out of the plane because it just breaks open. Blood splurted out of nowhere. I said splurted again. Spurted out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think somebody got thrown up against something. I wasn't
Maybe.
100% sure. It all happens very fast.
Yeah.
It's a lot of quick cuts.
Fire explodes and just incinerates everyone. So, like, they're dead. Movie's over. Just kidding. Casper wakes up to the two baby blue girls asking if he'll move. So I don't know if that was a premonition or if he passed out, like was sleeping instantly. I don't know.
It's a premonition. Yeah, he is getting a glimpse into death's design.
And he is so sweaty, just ran a marathon sweaty.
Oh my God, so much sweat.
He gets up and he hustles to the seat next to Todd where, the table, that piece that he saw in the premonition also breaks off. And he's like, this plane is going to explode. We need to get off. Everyone needs to get off. It causes a commotion, obviously. Carter gets pissed, and because he's an alpha male, it gets physical.
Yeah, Carter's reaction here is completely like disproportionate. I feel
correct. Yeah,
like Alex is like clearly having a panic attack, having some sort of mental health issue, and he's just like, "Would you quit it, you asshole?" And then tries to punch him.
Well, it's 2000. We don't care about mental health.
That's true. Okay.
But they get removed from the plane along with everyone else who vaguely got involved with this altercation, which included two teachers: Casper, Todd, Carter, Terry, the girlfriend, and Stifler. So they're all forced off, but Clear, she chooses to get off because she's taking Carter seriously. You can see it on her face.
She's taking Alex seriously.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Casper is what I wrote.
Todd actually chooses to get off too. Todd is sitting down the whole time.
Okay.
Up to this point in the movie, Todd is an irredeemable douche. All he talks about is getting laid. He uses some bad language. Briana kind of glossed over a part when he was talking about, God won't bring down the plane if there's a child on it, because there was more to that scene.
That wasn't him who said it. It was some other random teenager.
Are you sure?
Why. Yeah.
Maybe it was Todd's brother. But regardless, he's kind of a douche. But this point, I'm like, you know what? He's a good friend. He gets off this plane. He doesn't have to get off the plane. He gets off this plane just because his friend is stressing out and he calls his parents for him. We could all hope to have a friend like Todd someday.
Yeah, exactly. It's decided that they'll be on the next flight that leaves later that night, I think. The two teachers that got off, they kind of argue over who will stay with the kids versus who will get on the plane. And Mrs. Luton says to the man teacher who was actively speaking French, she's like, you have the whole French thing going on. You can, you go on the plane.
That's pretty smart. You should probably have somebody that speaks French.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Carter just can't let it go that they're losing a day on their trip, and he starts fighting with Casper again. Meanwhile, as we can see through the windows, their plane takes off and they just all watch it fully explode. And it's close enough to the airport where the windows that they're looking through also explode.
287 people died.
Oh, that's a lot.
That's what they mentioned in the memorial scene later. 287 people, which seems like a lot on one airplane, right?
Yeah, I feel like for international flights, the planes are bigger and more people.
Oh, that makes sense. I, again, would not know.
But a few things here. First, very obviously, this is a pre-9/11 film for multiple reasons. I feel like, this was made in 2000. If they had thought of this a year later, it wouldn't have happened. I feel like we wouldn't have had Final Destination.
Yeah, you're probably right. Or it would have been like Final Destination 2 with a car accident instead of
something
a
else.
plane. Yeah.
Because especially after this happened, Casper was on the plane saying it's going to explode. He would just be taken to jail. That's the end.
And he is kind of, he's interrogated by a couple FBI agents. They kind of watch him the whole movie. So, that does kind of happen a little bit.
A little bit. But I think it would be way worse. He'd be on a no-fly list.
He'd be in Guantanamo Bay. We would never hear from him again.
Exactly. Yeah. Second, they're all pissed at him. And this just escalates until each person dies, basically. But he saved their life. It is indisputable that whatever happened, it's weird, but they're all alive because of him.
In this scene, I actually have it in my notes too. Maybe I'm giving the film a little too much credit here, but I kind of chalk that entire scene up to survivor's guilt. The teacher is, hey, I told that teacher to get back on that plane. Todd, chose to get off. Clear chose to get off. Carter's doesn't have emotions. So, everybody's kind of reacting to this in the moment in a very, I would say, nonsensical way. And that kind of fits, I would say, how I imagine a lot of people would act in that situation.
And then the last thing I want to say about this kind of scene here is, I want to call it a fun fact, but it's not fun because it's sad. But this piece, particularly the plane exploding, was inspired by a true story. Have you heard about this?
No. Sounds fun.
Yeah. So the writer, or one of the writers, Jeffrey Riddick, he said that he had read a true story of a woman who was on vacation and received a call from her mom. She told her not to get on the flight. She was feeling really nervous about it. Just, she had a bad feeling. So the woman switched her flight and then found out that her original flight had crashed.
See, that's crazy to me because every time you fly, I have a bad feeling and I just have to swallow it and put it down. But when I hear stories like that, I feel like it's my job to save your life.
No, so when you have bad intuition, you can't trust your intuition. That's one of the problems. That's from Screen Rant. So Screen Rant wrote an article and had that. From Wikipedia, and well, first I researched this because I saw it referenced in a couple places, so I looked it up on Wikipedia. There was a plane crash, TWA Flight 800 in 1996. Have you heard about this part of it?
I did, yep.
Okay. Just like the film, it takes off from JFK, and it crashed pretty quickly, specifically 12 minutes after takeoff. And while its final destination was Rome, it was stopping in Paris first. Now, you'll be happy to know that this crash led to new requirements to prevent future fuel tank explosions, which is what they determined as the probable cause. Additionally, though, the plane had 16 students and 5 chaperones from a high school French club on it.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Riddick has denied any inspiration from this tragedy, but it was enough to leave a bad taste in people's mouths, including Roger Ebert, who mentions it in his review.
I don't know. I can't, obviously I've never been in that position where I've lost a loved one in a situation like that, but it's a movie. I'm very much of the belief, just when it comes to anything creative at all, that there really are no lines, so if you want to make a really offensive joke, that's fine, as long as it's funny. Just be funny. And same with this, if you want to do something that could potentially offend people, just make it well, and that's fine.
Well, and also, I mean, the crash was 4 years before the movie was made and released, but you could argue the same for John Denver. They used that song multiple times as a reference because he died in a plane crash recently.
We got movies about United Flight 93 years after 9/11, immediately.
I know, it was all too
so
fast.
It's I don't mean to downplay the grief of the people that lost people in this, but I think Roger Ebert grandstanding is a little much for me, but that's just me.
Next, they're being detained or kind of held in a space, and someone official. Did you get his title? It was long. His title, that guy who comes in first. Not the FBI agents.
Oh, no, I have no idea.
He works for the Department of something rather, having to do with airports.
The health and safety advisory, something.
Maybe.
I don't know.
He lets them know that their families have been called, and he asks if anyone needs counseling or anything because, obviously they just watched everyone die.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say all of them immediately.
Yes, none of them will have it, but they all need it. The FBI is also there, and they question them individually. They ask Casper how he knew, and he explains that he saw it happen. And he adds that he didn't really believe it would happen. So they ask, well, if that's the case, why did you get off? And there's really no answer for it.
Well, he was kicked off because Carter tried to fight him.
Oh, that's right. I literally have that written. He was kicked off, yeah.
Yeah.
Then they question Clear because she's not friends with any of them. So they wonder why she decided to get off the plane. And she says because she believed him. Next, the families come, but Clear has no one. So they all go home, and she gets taken home by Casper's parents. And that night, he's in the living room with his parents, who are sleeping on the couch. He's watching the news covering the crash, and he's upset. Thunder crashes, and he looks out the window like something is there, and he sees lightning crash on the road. So again, I think this is just one of those many moments of creating something invisible as a villain so that we can see something happening, but really nothing's there.
And I saw it kind of too in I don't know if metaphorical is the word, maybe symbolic, but lightning striking. It's not something you see firsthand in person all the time. And I kind of took that to be okay, you've seen this. So that has significance because this doesn't happen often.
Next, they're at a memorial service hosted by the school. And I think they said it had been a month since the crash.
Yeah, that sounds right.
There's a huge statue that's unveiled that's there to commemorate the victims, and it has all of the students' and teachers' names on it. Carter and Terry are in the line to view it, and they're just constantly touching each other. It's just to remind you that they're a couple. Never forget, they are a couple.
I mean, nothing gets me hotter than a memorial service.
Exactly. Casper is behind them, and Carter says, "I'm not crediting you with saving my life. I'm never going to die." Okay, so angsty and just the epitome of the teenager who thinks nothing can hurt them.
Again, maybe I'm giving the movie too much credit, but I feel like that's kind of a classic reaction for somebody that was just in a near-death experience to kind of swing wildly in the other direction and just like be reckless and be like, I'm never going to die. I'm immortal. Woo! You know?
I know. It's just, you need to say it to him. Like, you don't need to say it to Casper. You can just leave him alone and just have your thoughts.
Well, no, I mean, he can't because he's a dick.
Right.
This is covered. I do want to say he has one of those great, like, early 2000s necklaces that all the guys were wearing.
The ball chain?
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't notice that. I'm so sad I didn't
I really
notice
appreciated that. Yeah. And
I had one of those too.
I bet you did. I had one. So there are two things about this memorial that bothered me. The first is when they like dedicate the memorial right before they unveil it. Somebody's reading a Bible verse. And I just felt like, are you allowed to do that at a school? I feel like you can't. I mean, again, maybe this is like 2000, so the rules are different. But like today, you can't read a Bible verse in that situation. I feel like because
I think it depends on where.
That's a very fair point, actually. Yeah. And the other thing is the FBI agents come to this thing. Yeah. They're like standing in the back, like staring down Alex the whole time. And I'm just like, what? That is the most insensitive thing. If I'm the parents of one of the dead children, I just go over there and kick them both in the crotch.
Totally. Well, this is kind of a funny and sweet moment between Stifler and Casper. So Stifler is in line waiting to see the memorial up close, and he excitedly tells Casper that he passed his driver's test, although barely. And the teacher had told him, you're going to die at a very young age. So Stifler asks Casper if it's true, because obviously Casper has the ability to see the future.
That is a wildly unprofessional DMV employee.
It must have been so bad. But then Casper just says, not here, not now, not ever, which was really just sweet and comforting. At the statue, the teacher, Miss Luton, is crying, and Casper tries to talk to her, and she says, don't talk to me. You scare the hell out of me.
Also wildly unprofessional.
Yeah, so I can't stand the teacher.
No, but, grief.
It's a lot, though.
It's a lot.
And yes, grief, but he's a child. And again, he's the reason you're alive, so chill out.
Yeah, but I would say her especially has more guilt than anybody else because she sent that other teacher back there. And I'm not making excuses for it. Like I said, that's wildly unprofessional. It sounds like you are. But I get it.
Todd meets him at the statue, and Casper says, don't take this the wrong way, but I miss you. Again, because men cannot have feelings
no homo.
Ever. Yeah. They haven't seen each other, though, because Todd's brother was on the plane, and he didn't get off. And so Todd's parents won't let him see Casper, because that adds up perfectly fine. Clear comes over to him, though, and hands him a rose. So the roses were being handed out and supposed to go to the memorial, but she handed it to him and said, thanks for saving my life. So she's the only one to at least acknowledge that side of it. And Todd gives a speech, and that's pretty much the end of that. Next, we're at Todd's house, and he's in the bathroom, and there's ominous music playing. The wind blows through an open window, so that's what you were talking about. Totally appropriate for the wind to be blowing. So he closes it, but we still see that it's blowing around a little bit because things are kind of blowing around. And that's just, like I said, another visual representation of death. Todd sits on the toilet and the camera zooms in on the pipe, which begins to drip. So I did a little research because there's that saying that like the bathroom is the most dangerous place. So according to a 2011 article from the New York Times, every year over 235,000 people over the age of 15 visit the emergency room because of injuries occurring in the bathroom. Did you know?
I did not know. I mean, I've had some injuries while using the bathroom myself, but I can't say I've ever had to go to the emergency room.
Nearly 14% of those are hospitalized, and more than a third occur while bathing or showering. It's a slick and slippery place.
Yeah, and I imagine those numbers probably skew like elderly too,
Maybe. Meanwhile, Casper is reading a ton about fires, explosions, planes, airports. His room is just riddled with books and newspapers and print-offs.
Yeah, I mean,
he's obsessed.
Yeah, if the FBI came by to like just talk to him and see his room, it looks like the Unabomber shack.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot.
The fan is on, again, that fan, and the camera looks at it enough times. So this is where I was like, does he get his head caught in the fan and just die? Is this how he dies?
Are you familiar with the idea of fan death?
No.
That's a thing in, I believe it's South Korea, maybe a couple other Asian cultures. They believe that if you have a fan in your window overnight, it will suck all the oxygen out of your room and kill you. I think the big thing for that belief is because suicide is so, like, obviously it's not like cool anywhere, but it's very, very taboo there. So often I don't know if they still do, but they would chalk up suicides as fan deaths.
Oh.
So it's like an old like superstition. If you're ever having like a Korean grandmother over, don't leave a window fan in overnight.
Got it. Okay, good to know.
So that's all I kept thinking of when they kept showing this fan.
The fan blows the newspaper, which draws his attention, and he sees an article about the memorial service with a picture of Clear. He kind of throws it down in frustration and then pulls out a penthouse. Like he's just going to jerk away his sadness.
Now that is a realistic depiction of grief right there. I'm not even kidding. Like that is when you're a 17-year-old boy and you are feeling feelings that you don't know what to do with, you touch your penis. That's it.
Oh my God. Back with Todd, the drip has become a good amount of water that is moving with a purpose. Okay, it is moving. It knows where it's going. Todd puts a razor to his face and just immediately cuts himself. I know this was all to build tension, but it was really stupid of him to even be shaving. He didn't even have a 5 o'clock shadow. There was nothing there.
So 2 things about this. The first is, so he's the first one to die. So I don't think he knows there's anything weird. So I don't think he would be like, oh, I shouldn't do this, you know? And,
right.
But as someone with facial hair, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. If you want a smooth face, you have to shave it every day. You just have to. Or, I mean, some people do. I do, certainly.
Well, he kind of tends to the cut a little bit, and then he attempts to trim his nose hairs with a small pair of scissors. Then he just quickly abandons that. He plugs in a stereo, and that John Denver song is playing. He pulls out the cord just as the water is about to reach his feet. He walks away from the sink. Just a lot of little movements. Like he can't decide what to do in the bathroom. Yeah, what's happening.
This whole scene is just like a tease of like, you know, he picks up the razor and you're like, that's how he's going to die.
Yes.
And then you see the puddle and the electricity and you're like, that's how he's going to die. And this whole scene is basically just like teasing you to his death.
Returning to Casper, an owl lands on his window and it surprises him. So he throws the newspaper at it. Most of it hits the fan. So it kind of just goes into shards and they're blowing everywhere. One piece lands on his leg and it says TOD. So it's like part of probably the word today, but it just says TOD. Back to Todd. The water has continued to follow him. He slips on it and almost falls headfirst into the tub. But instead, he had been like folding clothes and dealing with laundry, and there was a line running across the shower. The clothesline wraps around his neck and just gets tighter and tighter. And he's in the tub, so he's fallen fully into the tub with it wrapped around his neck. He's struggling. He tries to reach for the scissors that he had been using to cut his nose hairs, but ultimately dies in what looks like a suicide.
Yeah, definitely looks like he hung himself. There was like soap on like the bottom of the bathroom, the bottom of the bathtub, so he like couldn't gain traction to like stand up. Honestly, very stressful to watch. Like that looks like a terrible way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Casper is running to Todd's house, and when he reaches it, he finds that the ambulance and the police and all that are there.
You did miss one tiny little detail, though.
What?
Did you notice? After Todd dies, the water that was leaking recedes back into the toilet.
Yeah.
Spoopy.
Clear is across the street behind a tree and tells him to leave because the FBI is there. And Todd's parents come out as they wheel away his body. And his father goes over to Casper to say, "You made him feel so bad about his brother staying on the plane that he killed himself." Unnecessary. So thankfully, Casper, he knows that this doesn't add up. He knows that his friend did not kill himself, but he is also a kid. Why would you, and you're going through something, you just lost both of your kids, it's hard, but why would you want to make someone else's kid feel awful? Maybe enough that they then kill themselves.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that like pretty much every adult in this movie is a giant asshole.
Yes.
Like the FBI agents, Todd's parents,
everyone.
The teacher, they all suck.
The next day, Casper goes to Clear's house and she's making art with metal. They have this whole conversation and basically Casper's trying to just make sense of what's happening. He suggests that maybe Todd was just the first and that more is to come, but that he wishes he could just see Todd to know that it wasn't a suicide. So Clear smirks and says, "Let's go see him," which was just a weird character change for her. She immediately became someone else. They break into the funeral home through the ceiling, Mission Impossible style. And they land in a casket, which is just hilarious at this point. Like, yeah, we get it. They're going to die. They find the body in the morgue. And when they reach it, the arm moves. And they kind of step back. And I think they maybe yelp a little. And a man emerges from like an alcove in the room or something.
That would be Tony Todd.
Yes. And he says, "Shush, you'll wake the dead." Ugh. Creepy factor on this guy is at a 10. He is extremely knowledgeable about death. He talks about it like it's an entity. And he says, in death, there are no accidents, no coincidences, no mishaps, and no escapes.
Yeah, like whoever said that this isn't death is just straight up lying. Like this is very, very obviously death.
He says that everything is part of death's design. Casper asks, does it mean that if you figure out the design, you can cheat death? And the man says, you already did that by walking off the plane. Your friend's death means that there's a new design.
Ooh.
So death is coming no matter what, is what I gathered.
I actually looked up something based on this scene because I thought it was really cool. There's a scene when they first get into the morgue before Tony Todd comes out. Todd's arm kind of twitches a little bit in like a jump scare way, and that's where you first see Tony Todd.
Yeah.
And he called it a cataveric spasm. So I looked it up. Totally real. And it could actually happen in this situation because cataveric spasms are very rare, but often associated with violent deaths under extreme physical circumstances with intense emotion.
That's crazy.
But it is crazy, but the name is a little misleading and it doesn't work quite the way it does in the movie. So the way it happens in the movie is Todd's arm just kind of like jumps up randomly. In real life, a cataveric spasm is very similar to rigor mortis. It's just something getting very stiff very quickly, like a hand. If you're like clutching something right when you die, your hand kind of stays locked like that. But the bigger difference is that rigor mortis can easily be undone and this cannot. So, like, if you die, like, clutching this, I'm pretty sure your hand is just kind of like that.
That's so creepy and scary.
Yeah. Again, it's very rare. It doesn't, like, happen. But I would say that, you know, that counts as a violent death under extreme physical circumstances.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
While they're having this conversation, he's still working on the body right in front of them. And, like, blood just squirts because he's injecting something or sticking something. I don't know. And they just run out as he says, I'll see you soon.
And he's not deaf? Come on.
Well, he also knows they're going to die. And he's probably, you know, the funeral home guy.
How does he know they're going to die? Because he's deaf?
Because of death's design.
His design.
Sure. Okay. They sit outside at a coffee shop and Casper shows Clear the piece of newspaper saying that it's a message. So that little piece that said Todd. Then he sees a bus go by in the reflection of a window, but a bus does not actually go by. He goes on suggesting that getting off the plane messed up the design because maybe it was their time and they weren't meant to get off. Therefore, it's still their time unless they can figure out the pattern and cheat it again. I don't quite fully understand what's happening here. I feel like in the universe, there is no getting around it.
So what they believe at this point in the movie, and it's not, you know, spoiler alert, it's not actually how it works, but what they think happens is if they can somehow avoid death again, it'll just move on. So basically what they're saying is something's going to happen to us that is going to kill us, but if we can somehow subvert that, we will survive. Which I think is kind of a flawed premise from the start, because if that were the case, you wouldn't be chased after getting off the plane. So, I mean, why is the second time going to work? But, you know, I guess that's why it got a 35. but yeah, so that's their premise. If we can just get super close to dying and then avoid it at the last possible second, we're going to get away from this.
While they're talking, Carter and Terry drive by and he's just so pissed even seeing Casper simply existing. Carter turns his car around, almost causing an accident and getting Stifler almost killed.
Stifler was just like riding his bike nearby.
Innocently
he just
riding his bike.
Happened to be there.
And Clear, during their conversation, isn't quite on the same page, and she says that she actually now believes that Todd did kill himself because I feel like she thinks Casper is talking crazy.
Yeah, I think this is kind of the last moment where she doubts him, and then very soon she's just like, oh my God, Alex, you're Jesus.
Yeah. At the same time, Miss Luton is also on the street. Carter and Terry get out of the car, so now they're like all together.
What a coincidence.
And he gets into it again with Casper, but Terry is just fed up. She says, if you want to live your life beating up Alex, then you can just drop fucking dead, and is immediately hit by a bus.
Love it. Briana's face at this scene. So this bus is very much out of nowhere. You know, Terry takes one step back and then is immediately like, this bus is going like 60 on Main Street. But whatever, that's not even the point. And Briana is just staring slack-jawed at the TV for a good like 20 seconds. Like, what did I just see? It was fantastic.
Yeah. Back home, Casper is watching the news and learns the cause of the crash was a technical issue that leaked combustible fluids. And they show a seating chart and how it would have traveled from where it started to where it had to go to cause the explosion. And so he recreates that, but includes where they were all seated. He overlaps that with his computer screen, and it traveled through where they all sat. And so he sees that the deaths are happening in that order. According to that order, next would be Miss Luton. At Miss Luton's house, she is surrounded by boxes because she's moving. She's telling someone on the phone that even though she's lived in this house her whole life, it's just too painful. She tells the person that even looking out her front yard makes her fearful. and she is looking out her front yard and sees Casper.
Yeah, and why is he sneaking around her yard? Like, I get that he wants to, like, try and help her, try and warn her, whatever, but, like, the last time she saw you, she told you that you scared her. So your response to that is to slink around her yard in the dark.
Right. Well, he's just standing there at first, and she reacts like it's Jason or Michael Myers, basically. So she just hangs up immediately with whoever she's talking to, and she calls the FBI agents. While he's fiddling with her tire, presumably to keep her from leaving, I guess?
No. He's checking her tires to make sure that they're not, slashed or...
Okay. The FBI rolls up and takes him away. Miss Luton walks away from her closed window, but that wind still blows.
Weird.
So weird. Casper's being questioned, and he explains that he is seeing a pattern. And they're like, oh, you see it too? As in that he is always there when these terrible things are happening. That's the pattern. He's the common denominator. Meanwhile, Miss Luton is packing and talking to herself about various things that she finds. And she finds that a John Denver record. She's like, oh, this is Mom's favorite. And so she plays it.
Same song, Rocky Mountain High.
She's preparing tea and she starts to boil water. As she fills it, she wipes off the outside and you see a smoky reflection cross the kettle. And she turns around and doesn't see anything other than the plant leaves blowing for no reason. She puts the kettle on the stove and tries to light it, but it blows out. So she lights it again with a match. And this just made me so nervous and is the reason why I don't have a gas stove. But similar to Todd, we have this whole progression of like, this is what's going to kill her. This is what's going to kill her. Back with Casper, they tell him they know he didn't blow up the plane, but then others started dying. So they decided to stick around and investigate a little bit more. They ask if he can promise that no one else will die. And he says, no, as long as I'm here. So as long as he's with these people, he can't stop the other deaths from happening is what he meant.
But he has to know how that sounds.
Right. Yeah. They let him go simply because they can't hold him for any real reason. And Agent Shrek says that kid gives me the creeps because a couple of times I believed him, or I felt like I was believing him. Miss Luton is now pouring water into the mug, and then this was so dramatic. She screams and throws the water out of the glass. And I think it's because it was a mug from the high school. Did you notice this?
I think so, yeah.
You don't notice what you're grabbing out of your cabinet?
I mean, you have like 40 mugs. You could just easily grab one.
And I know what I grab every time because I purposefully select each mug that I use every time.
I couldn't deal with having to make that kind of decision every single day.
It's an easy decision.
Doesn't sound
low stakes.
No such thing.
Anyway, she instead pours vodka out of the freezer into it, and the mug cracks, I guess because it just had boiling water in it, and now it has like very cold vodka in it.
Science.
Yeah. And so it starts dripping, but she doesn't notice because it didn't break. It just cracked enough for liquid to come out. She carries it over to her computer and she leans over the giant monitor because it's 2000 and the mug drips all over the top of that monitor. She steps away, but the computer sparks and smokes. So she approaches it again and it just fully explodes and a piece of it breaks off into her neck and blood just starts gushing. As Casper is walking home, some guy he's burning leaves in his yard. This is just how fires start. Why are we doing this? The burning leaves start blowing around, and for some reason he sees this as a sign, so he books it to Miss Luton's. At Miss Luton's house, a whole host of things are happening, leading to the kitchen catching fire, the vodka exploding. She falls down. She spots the towel that she was using earlier to like wipe off a dish, and she reaches for it, except that it was resting on the top of a knife block. So the entire block falls off the counter, and one of the knives lands in her stomach.
And at this point in the scene, I'm starting to get really big, like, Black Knight from Monty Python vibes, where she's just taking blow after blow, and she's like, it's just a flesh wound.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
fine. Just a flesh wound. It is very hard to kill her in this scene,
yeah.
And I'm here for it.
At this time, Casper comes in, and he tries to help, but the oven explodes, which pushes a chair over, and the chair lands on the knife, which pushes it in deeper into her stomach, and she's dead.
Now, this idiot, who is wanted by the FBI...
He reacted quickly.
He put his hands on the knife and pulled it out of her.
Yeah.
So you just got to make sure that your handprints are all over that murder weapon.
For sure. Yeah. So he realizes that. He drops it and he runs. And as he's running out, Stifler's on his bike again outside, and the entire house explodes, and Casper just runs away.
Cool guys don't look back at explosions. Everybody knows that.
Next, Clear called a meeting at the memorial with Stifler and Carter. And she says the cops are waiting for her, so she needs them to go get Casper, except she then goes with them. So that was confusing. But she wants to go find him because they need him because he knows who's next. They go to Jones Beach State Park, which I think is near where the crash happened, or is where the crash was, basically. Clear finds him on the beach and they talk. He's looking up at the sky and asks, do you think they're still up there somehow? And she divulges that her dad died when she was 10 and her mom remarried and abandoned her. She says, if this is the plan, fuck death, and believes somewhere up there is a place where everything is still good. So they're just having like a real nice teenage conversation about fate and death and all that kind of angsty stuff. Next, they're all in Carter's car. That's really hard to say. Carter's car.
And this immediately, I'm like, why are all four of you in the same spot?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like at this point, you have to treat him like the president and the vice president, where they can never be in the same room at the same time.
Separate places. Carter calls Casper a warlock and asks him if he knew Miss Luton was going to be dead before she died. And he's coming around a little bit, you know? Casper confirms that he knew, and now Carter believes him. He wants to know who is next. And Casper doesn't respond, so he takes that to mean he's next, that Carter is next. And he says, oh, you get off having control over me? Carter says, why wait? Me and Terry can be together. And he just floors it. So now he's just going to kill all of them.
And one of my favorite things about this scene, too, is they tell him, like, Carter, it doesn't work that way. You can't just kill yourself. But in future installments, it actually does work that way. There's a character that tries to kill himself again and again and again and can't die. Like,
seriously?
Yeah. So he tries to suffocate himself in the garage with his car, and the car keeps stalling. He hangs himself and he just keeps breathing.
Oh my God.
There was one other thing. I think maybe he tried to shoot himself and the gun misfired. But there were three things. He kept trying to kill himself. The other characters walk in on him hanging from the ceiling and he's alive. He's like, I can't die.
Oh my God.
So it does work like that in future installments. So it kind of makes me wonder what would have happened if Carter went through with it here. But we'll never know.
They're all screaming at him to stop, and, you know, he doesn't. He's on a mission here. And Carter looks in his lap and sees a seatbelt ripped. And then he looks again, and he's buckled. Clear tells Carter to get control, and he says, I'm not afraid. I control my destiny. He takes his hand off the wheel, and they nearly get hit by an 18-wheeler, but miss. And then Casper sees a train go by, and just like the bus, he doesn't actually see a real train go by. Carter finally stops on the train tracks, and a train is, of course, coming. Now Clear is begging him to move the car, but he refuses. And those pieces that, you know, block off the train tracks have now come down, and they're surrounding the car. They all get out except for Carter, and they're screaming at him to, you know, get out. And he finally says, it's not my time. And he tries to start the car, but it won't start. He catches the black smoke in the rearview mirror. So it's like death is coming. He can't unbuckle. The door won't open. Casper's helping him. And they manage to pull him out of the car at the absolute very last second. And the train smashes into the car. Stifler freaks out saying, like, you're supposed to die. I have to get away from you. You're dead. And there's this piece of metal that we've kind of been flashing to like a couple times. I think it came from the car and it went under the train and it's on the train tracks. And as the train finishes passing them, it kind of gets whisked up and cuts his head off. And not even at the neck, but like cuts his head horizontally across.
Yeah, it cuts off like the top half of his head.
Ugh,
so
yeah.
it's pretty cool. I mean, it's not super graphic. Like they don't linger on it. You know, it's a very fast death. And it's
swift cut.
It's pretty fun.
Casper explains that he saw the seatbelt rip, like he saw the plane explode, and he realizes that if he intervenes, he can interrupt the design. The cops are coming, and Carter tells them to leave. They go to a cottage nearby Clear's house that used to belong to her dad. Casper death-proofs the joint. He lights a lamp, but he puts it in water. He opens a can with these thick gloves on. Wind blows through the gap in the door, and it blows over a small bag of trash, which hits a fishing rod that latches onto a door, which starts to open the door, but he quickly closes it, and a knife comes through the door, but it misses him, and he yells out, I got this, cabin rigged to beat you. So he's just losing it.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the early 2000s, so we're not talking about mental health, but he's an untreated schizophrenic at this point. He is just not well.
I found a tweet, or I found an article that mentioned a tweet from Devin Sawa. This movie came out on March 17th, 2000, and he tweeted, 20 years ago today, Final Destination was released. Remember that scene where I was quarantined in that cabin so death wouldn't get me? I'm doing that right fucking now in real life. So he tweeted that on March 17th, 2020, when we all started quarantine.
Yeah, and I mean, look at us now on the other side of it. Good thing we just did those 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and everybody listened, and now we can just live our normal lives.
Everything's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
Over at Clear's house, the FBI is waiting, and she surprises them at their car, saying she wants them to go with her because he can't do it alone. This was confusing because what ultimately happens is they go to the cabin without her. But before that, at the cabin, he's throwing up crumpled newspaper into the fire, and he spots a picture of the 2 baby blue girls from the plane. And it reminds him that he never actually moved his seat. So in the premonition, he did. He moved his seat and sat down, but in real life, he didn't. So he realizes that he got the order wrong, and it's clear who's next.
Oh, no.
So meanwhile, lightning hits the electrical box at Clear's house. So all of the electricity goes out. By the way, how does she have this house? She just lives alone as a child in a giant house?
Yeah, I mean, I think she said her mom abandoned her, so I just kind of assumed that was their home. And
it's just paid for.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, this is before the crash.
People
could own houses back then.
Right. Her dog is barking outside at the live wire that broke off, and it's just whipping around. I'm very anxious about the dog. Anything could happen. The dog is fine. Casper leaves the cabin, but this is where the cops roll up. So, again, she wanted to go with them. But she just told them where he was anyway, I guess. Clear goes outside, and the big pole to hold laundry. So one of those, I don't even know what to call it. It's like this pole, and then it has these lines all around it, almost like a...
Like tree branches?
Yes.
That you use to hang
the laundry. Yeah, that blew over, and it hits her, but not really bad enough. So she gets up and she tries to release her dog. Casper is running through the woods, so he got into a boat to cross the water before, so the cops wouldn't get him. And now he's running through the woods. He tumbles and nearly lands on a branch in his chest that would kill him. Clear's pool breaks, so water is everywhere. We have a live wire and water everywhere. She gets the dog released, and he runs off like a good little boy. The lightning hits a tree that falls on Casper in the woods. He lands face down in enough water to basically drown him. And it's almost like death has caught on that he's trying to fix things, and it's not going to let him do that this time. But the tree also masks the cops, so they miss him, which is good. Clear is now climbing up the outside of her house to avoid the live wire. And when she gets inside, all the electrical is just blowing up all around her. She gets into the garage, gets into the car, but of course the garage door won't open because that's mechanical or electrical. She attempts to drive through it, but the metal for the garage door breaks through the windshield. She manages to get out, but the car tips over. Oh, yeah. So with the car, she gets out, but the car tips over a can of gasoline that's now spilling in the garage.
I think it was turpentine.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know what it was. Casper arrives, having been able to pull himself out of the muck, which he was gurgling a lot, and tells her not to get out because the tires ground her. Again, more science. Is that true?
It is not true.
Damn.
You are safe in a car, but it is not because the tires ground you. It's because the car acts as what's called a Faraday cage, where if lightning strikes the car, the metal enclosure keeps what's inside not touching the metal, safe from the electricity. But that's definitely a thing, we're all told that as kids. And it is true. It is safe, but it's not because of the rubber. It's because of the metal.
Interesting. Things lead to the car going up in flames, and he notices the turpentine. And he says that the car is going to explode. So he tells her that he's going to take the wires so it'll take him and then skip her. Against her wishes, obviously. He grabs them, and it just shoots him back, and she gets out of the car, so she's safe. And it fades to white, which I thought this was going to be some kind of in between the worlds moment. Probably the wrong kind of movie. We don't really do that. Instead, we have Allie Larder, who is now blonde, a sign that all is right with the world. So Clear, Casper, and Carter are in Paris. Cannot believe they got on a plane.
Yeah, that was what I was just about to say. I would never get on a plane again.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
Ever.
They cheers to those they lost, and Carter laughs at the three of them actually being together because it is kind of insane. And he says, "We did it. We won." And Clear says, "We won a chance at a full life."
Of course they did. And that's how the movie ends.
The
That's
end.
it. Yeah.
Casper brings it all up again, though, because he just Can't help himself. And Clear is just like, what if the design was that we live? What if this was all supposed to happen? But Casper starts getting all those feelings again, and he decides to go back to the hotel.
And there is somebody, a street musician nearby, that starts playing Rocky Mountain High in French.
I didn't recognize that. This time, Clear sees a bus. She calls out to Casper, and he barely misses getting hit. The bus hits a car, which makes this huge metal sign hanging on a building, I guess, fall. Carter saves him, so he's now been saved twice. And he says, see, I told you, you were next, but it skipped you, so who's next? And the sign comes back because it's like swinging, and it kills Carter.
Yeah.
And that's the end.
Real quick, before we get on to, like, you know, the end of the movie, here's the part that bothers me about this. Like, they're sitting in Paris, and Alex is like, I've been thinking a lot about this. I have all these concerns. And, like, do you think that maybe these concerns should have been brought up back in America before you got on another airplane?
Right.
Like, that.
Yeah.
Come on. You're just asking to die at this point.
But they wanted the tribute moment in Paris.
I guess so. Full circle, right?
All right. So let's talk about a review that I found. We're back to Roger Ebert because it was 2000, so he had a review for this. He gave it 3 stars.
Really? He gave it 3 stars?
3 stars, yeah.
All right.
He said, Final Destination observes the time-honored formula of the dead teenager movie. It begins with a lot of living teenagers and dooms them. But the movie, made by 2 veterans of the X-Files TV series, is smarter and more original than most DTMs. It has mordant humor, Ruby Goldberg death traps.
Let me pause you right there. Rube Goldberg. So I actually had that in my notes, and I didn't mention it because I felt like I've just gone on a lot of tangents today. But a Rube Goldberg machine is like any machine that you see that's like very convoluted. Like, do you remember the game Mousetrap when you were a kid? That, like, those things where like a marble rolls down a thing and then lights a candle.
Oh, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and that's called a Rube Goldberg machine. And that is what their deaths. Yeah. Absolutely, 100%.
So Rube Goldberg death traps and sophomoric but earnest discussions of fate. Also an opening scene that assures this film will never, ever be shown on an airplane. That's for damn sure. This scenario is, of course, in the worst possible taste in view of the real fate of TW-8 Flight 800, also bound for Paris with students aboard. So that's what he says about it. But then he says, I will observe that and not belabor it. The explosion is a setup for the rest of the movie, in which it appears that the survivors also may be marked for death, and that Alex is psychic and can foresee their deaths. Can he really? That's where the movie gets interesting, since instead of using his eerie precognitions as a gimmick, it allows the characters to talk urgently about their feelings of doom and helplessness, which was interesting. The film in its own way is biblical in its dilemma, although the students use the code word fate when they are really talking about God. In their own terms, in their own way, using teenage vernacular, the students have existential discussions.
Yeah, you know, that's actually, again, another note that I had here that I just didn't bring up because I feel like I'm talking too much. But
well, it is a podcast.
Yeah, I know. They definitely, like, when they talk about death and like the powers that they ascribe to death in this movie, like, death pretty much is God. Like, to be able to do the things that death does throughout the course of this movie, it has to be like omnipotent.
Yeah.
So if it's omnipotent and all powerful, what is it if not God?
Good point. But I never realized that they didn't say God until I read this review, and I was like, yeah, they never talk about, like, I don't know, theoretically the other side, but they do say fate, which, yeah. The movie is neither serious nor quite ironic. Sometimes it's funny, but in a creepy way rather than in the breezier style of the Scream movies, even though I don't think those are funny.
Hilarious.
The very last shot, set in Paris, but filmed in Canada during a last-minute reboot or reshoot in January, is a shaggy dog trick. I laughed, I guess, but the movie really deserves better. My guess is the original ending was more considered, but New Line was afraid of it. So have you heard about there being like an alternate ending?
No, I had no idea, to be honest.
So I looked it up. It took a while for me to find it, but Alex was supposed to die after Clear exited his car, or her car. As she leaves the vehicle, it ignites and he dies inside. When she screams, seemingly in that moment, it's actually several months later. Clear is in the hospital giving birth to their son, Alex Browning II. As it turns out, she and Carter survived the entirety of Final Destination because they were able to cheat death's design with 2 key methods of exempting themselves from it: new life and the death of the final person in the original design. The concept of new life cheating death wasn't introduced to the franchise until Final Destination 2, when Clear proposes that it could work.
Yeah, I honestly, I kind of like that ending. I wonder why they changed it.
Yeah. They haven't made a great or distinguished film, but working within a tire genre with a talented cast, they've brought unusual substance and impact to the DTM. The vision of the airplane crash is remarkably scary, and other scenes, like a car stopped on the railroad tracks, work, even though they're cliches, because of the dialogue and the motivations of the characters. It being a tired genre, I had to look this up a little bit just to see how many like DTMs I could find pretty quickly. Scream, Scream 2, Scream 3. That was 96, 97, and 2000.
I'm sorry, what is DTM?
Dead Teenager Movie.
Gotcha.
We have I Know What You Did Last Summer, I Still Know What You Did Last Summer in 97 and 98. We have The Craft in 96, The Faculty in 98, Urban Legend in 98, Dead Man's Curve in 98, Disturbing Behavior in 98, Blair Witch in 99, and Halloween H2O or H20 in 98. 98 was a big year to just kill all the teenagers.
Yeah, I'm in, and now as an old man, I still want to see dead teenagers. So let's do it.
Final Destination will no doubt be a hit and inspire the obligatory sequels. Absolutely. Like the original Scream, this movie is too good to be the end of the road. I have visions of my own. I foresee poor Alex making new friends and then envisioning their deaths as they embark on ocean liners, trains, buses, and dirigibles. It's a funny thing about Hollywood. It can't seem to get enough of dead teens. Talk about biting the hand that feeds you. Funny that he thinks Alex will live because, I mean, I've seen in my research he dies in between movies.
Yeah, well, I think they left it open-ended there. Most rumors are that, you know, it was a contract dispute and he just ended up not coming back for the second, because they do leave it open-ended there. A little spoiler alert for the second. Clear is really good in the second one.
Is it Ali Larter?
Yep, it is. They kind of introduce her. She is in a psychiatric hospital in like a padded room, and, you know, the nurse, before the main character of number 2 is going in to see her, the nurse is like, you need to get rid of all nail clippers, shoes, like anything, blah, 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 blah. She asked the nurse, like, how long is Clear going to be in here? And she's like, she's here voluntarily. She can leave whenever she wants. So she's like living in this padded room for like safety. And I love that.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah, I'm honestly a little surprised that Roger Ebert loved it so much. That's a pleasant surprise.
All right, let's give it our scores. What's your jump score?
0. I don't think there were any jump scares in this movie.
I gave it a 1, I think, because there were a couple moments that made me
jump
a little.
I guess the arm twitching, the bus.
Oh, yeah, the arm twitch. That really got me.
Yeah, but I don't think you yelped as much. This is probably the least vocal you've been throughout a movie we've watched. So I gave it a 0.
And your nightlight factor?
It's a 4.
Wow. Okay.
Why? Does that
I gave it a 1.
Yeah. Well, I'm afraid of flying.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this isn't quite as bad. I would say 2 has a bit more of a nightlight factor because we encounter that logging truck all the time, whereas most of us don't fly all the time. So the nightmare factor is just a little bit there for me because that's literally my worst fear. So.
Yeah. And your overall horror buff score?
A 6 out of 10, slightly above average, you know, good popcorn movie. Late 90s, early 2000s was kind of the peak time for this kind of movie, and it shows its age, but in mostly an endearing way.
Yeah.
This is just a fun movie that I will never complain about watching.
My scaredy cat score, again, to remind you, this doesn't reflect on the movie. It just means how scared I was. I gave it a 1 because it really wasn't scary for me. But it was a good movie. Yeah. I did like it.
I feel like we're going to have to like move Sinister up or like change our list, because I got to tell you, over the next like 7-8 episodes, we don't have anything super scary until Sinister.
No, we are watching Blair Witch soon. So we're already talking about it. Next movie is Poltergeist, everyone. So make sure you watch Poltergeist. But I think after that, or after the next week, we're watching Blair Witch.
I don't think Blair Witch is going to stick with
Blair
you as much
Witch
as you
is going to scare the shit out of me. I am so afraid to watch Blair Witch.
I am.
And I know that it's all the debunking of it. And in fact, I just read like an article about it like less than a year ago about even more debunking of it. And I'm still afraid.
Can I talk now?
Yes.
You want to interrupt me this time?
No.
I feel like you're going to be bored and you're going to be motion sick.
All right.
We'll see.
I'm thinking I'm going to be scared.
And don't get me wrong.
Can't that be enough for you people?
Don't get me wrong. I really enjoy this movie, but it doesn't scare me either. So I really don't think it's going to scare you, but we'll see. And you know what? Here's the compromise. If Blair Witch in a couple weeks does not scare you, we're going to shuffle our schedule and we're going to watch something really scary the next week.
I'm going to say it's scary no matter what.
No, you have to be honest.
I'll be honest. Okay, fine, deal. Oh
Integrity, God. Briana.
Oh my God. Okay. So again, because we kind of rushed over that, we are watching Poltergeist for next week. So everyone make sure that you brush up on your Poltergeist. And any final thoughts?
No, I think I'm good. I'm just excited to have watched that movie again.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. Don't forget to follow on our social medias, follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and please rate and review.
And tell all your friends
Tell
about how
all your friends.
funny I am and how obnoxious Briana is.
So rude. You want to end it on a rude note?
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
You really just put the nail in the coffin today with the Carter Casper thing. That really was not a good showing for you.
No,
you can just like fade out over it. Like you put the music here and just fade us out as we're talking about this.
Fine.